Hey everyone, it's Strange Michael. Now I get to talk about, in my Hellraiser reviews, my personal, at least at this moment until the reboot and everything comes out and I rewatch everything else after this movie, my personal favorite of the Hellraiser franchise. I love this movie. It's called Hellraiser Inferno. Yes, I have a separate copy, even though I have a box that I've been showing you guys for these reviews. Inferno is a very, very, very underrated film that I love deeply. I cannot believe, and I still couldn't believe, back when I saw this, how much people hate it. People consider this one of the worst Hellraisers ever made. Now, to be fair, this is the first of the direct-to-video films after Bloodline, and how weak that was, and how much people seem to, for whatever reason, still defend that movie. I don't know why. It's a mess. Going from that back to this. In many of the direct-to-video films in general, from what I understand and from what I remember, typically a lot of the time, this one's no different from that, by the way. I'm not defending it. This one feels, just like a lot of those after it feel, like movies that were written without Pinhead involved, or Cenobites, or Hellraiser in the title. Maybe just a movie called Inferno, that all of a sudden became a Hellraiser movie because of Miramax or whoever. Now, before I knew that the trailer was coming out for the reboot, for Hulu, I wasn't going to do a Hellraiser franchise review. I kind of said that in my first review for the first movie. And I went ahead and just randomly watched this. I wanted something scary to watch, something that really gets under my skin. In this film, literally, at one point that happens to somebody. Inferno came out in 2000, about 4 years after Bloodline. And again, being direct-to-video, you would expect it to have a lower budget, which it does. But to me, it feels like a more complete movie. It's directed by Scott Derrickson, who did the first Doctor Strange. He did Sinister. He just did The Black Phone. I just reviewed Black Phone here on my channel. The guy's a very talented man. To have a low-budget movie, and this might even be his first movie, I don't know, it's one of the best of the Hellraiser franchise, and I will stand by that to this day, mainly because I'm a massive fan of Silent Hill. I have every single Silent Hill game. I love them all. I've played them to death. I have watched playthrough after playthrough of those games. I love them all. If you love Silent Hill like I do, this movie will be for you. This is really the Silent Hill movie that was never made. I love both of the movies in a lot of different ways, but this feels like a Silent Hill movie. Now, Pinhead is barely in it. He might be in it for a total of like 5 minutes out of the entire hour-and-a-half runtime, and I just think it's amazing. I love the flick. It's still, to me, the scariest movie of the entire franchise. I know a lot of people consider the first two to be the scariest. I'm not a fantasy guy, and this film, just like many of its sequels, don't really expand on the lore of hell. I don't know about Judgment, I don't remember Revelations, but the other films coming after this in the main 8 film series, I don't remember anything really expanding on the lore any more than after Part 4. So, what is the story of this one? Basically, we have a cop played by, it's a fellow I saw in some Christian movies a while back called Craig Sheffer, that's his name. He was in the Mark 1 and 2. Very weird films if you haven't seen those. Craig Sheffer, I consider myself a fan of. I think he's kind of underrated as a lower budget film actor. I think he's good. I think he's a good leading man a lot of the time. He knows how to really carry himself. And for this movie, he's playing a scumbag, a very selfish man. He has a wife and daughter. He's a police officer, an investigator. And he's a dirty cop. Just plain and simple. He's a dirty cop. He's the definition of a dirty cop. And he's a scumbag. Even to his partner, he's a scumbag. Watching him try to save his own tail when something really bad happens after he comes in contact with the typical old Lemerchants or Lament box, the configuration, the puzzle box, as you guys know. When he comes across this thing, he happens to tinker with it, he opens it up, but right before that, the night before, of course, he's been cheating on his wife with, like, prostitutes, and he's having affairs and that kind of thing, even though he has a daughter at home. Very rarely does he stay home to spend time with his family. He takes them for granted, and that's a big theme in this movie, a big symbolic theme in this movie. And even though the film has its goofier moments, I think it really comes together with the regret and the dread going from beginning to end in this movie. It's just a constant feeling of just dread throughout the entire film. And the first film and the second film kind of had that going for them too. They're very cold-hearted movies. This, to me, gets away from the puns that 3 and 4 had. It gets away from the jokes 3 and 4 had. It gets away from the scale of number 2. It gets away from the lore of number 1. It gets away from all those things, and that's why a lot of people accuse it of being a script that had nothing to do with Hellraiser, even though the screenwriter, I believe, still argues to this day that that was never the case, that it was always intended to be a Hellraiser movie. I don't know how true that is. I don't really believe it. I kind of believe Scott Derrickson. Anyway, I really think that the movie is super underrated. I think it's fantastic. I think so many things about it are so great. And watching this guy, even though he's a scumbag, getting kind of a comeuppance, but also I have pity on him watching what he goes through in this movie after that young prostitute he had slept with is killed in a brutal way. And he technically didn't do it, but the setup, according to him and his partner, when he reveals it to his partner, looks like he did it. He goes in panic mode again, trying to cover his own tracks, trying to make it look like it wasn't him that did this. But things are getting weird. There's also a serial killer who has kidnapped some kid, and he's cutting off a finger, and every time he murders somebody, he puts one of this poor kid's fingers near this victim somehow, some way. There's a lot of death in this movie, not up to the scale of like the slaughter scene from Hellraiser 3, Hell on Earth, but there's a lot of horrifically brutal things in this movie. You don't have things like in Hellraiser 4 where you had the chain shootout and rip that guy's face in half. That was brutal there. That was good for a bad movie. With this movie, the kind of brutality we're talking about, really horrifying. Some of the imagery in here really gets to me. And if you're a big Silent Hill fan and you love imagery, you love symbolic nature of certain images and that kind of thing, this film is filled with that. I love it. I love the focus on this. To me is the perfect version of that sexual aspect that a lot of these Hellraiser films have, that it really understands lust. It understands why that sinful nature is so evil and what mankind really is without God. I think that's fantastic. I love it. And it's not like the film has some kind of secret Christian message. It's not like that. I don't want you to think that. That's not why I like this movie. It's just the general understanding of those things and those sins and how they are brought to light in this movie, and just how evil Craig Sheffer's character really is. Even without Pinhead barely being in the film, the character study we have here, the investigation crime thriller story that we have here, I love it. Now, again, it's not perfect. It has some flaws here that I think will affect other people's viewing more than it would mine. I get that, but they don't harm the movie for me, and it's not going to lower my rating anymore either. I think you already know where I'm going with this, and you're probably right. When you know me well enough, know my peculiar taste on movies. I love Inferno. I think it's fantastic. I think the characters are fantastic. I think the casting for pretty much everybody is fantastic here, even down to the monsters. I don't even know if you'd call them Cenobites. Some look like Cenobites, some don't. There's one in particular that scares the hell out of me. I don't want to explain anything about him. I don't even know what to say about him, but he's terrifying. He's really, really scary. I think everybody does a solid job. Craig Sheffer's character is a scummy person, so he might not be the right guy for a protagonist. Maybe people aren't going to like the movie because he's unlikable. People want to root for their characters like they did with Kirsty. I'm sorry. He's just not that kind of character. The script is not meant for that. It's a very early 2000s and late 90s type of script where you're not rooting for this guy. He's an evil person. The kind of stuff that he does, he's a bad guy. But you can't help, with Craig Sheffer's, acting and everything else, you can't help but feel bad for this guy. Now, that serial killer I mentioned too, I forgot to mention the look of him. He kind of just wears like a leather jacket and stuff the few times we get to see him. But the way his mask and stuff is, I assume it's a mask. We don't really know if he's some kind of demon or spirit or whatever he is, just a human, we don't really know. This guy, just all you can see is kind of like the Chatterer from the original two movies. He just has his teeth, and sometimes he sticks out a really long serpent-like tongue. We don't really know much about this guy, but his face is just surfaceless. It's just a perfectly Slender Man rounded head with a mouth. Imagine Slender Man with a mouth and a leather jacket, except for being super tall. This guy's a regular old-sized dude. Imagine that. This dude is genuinely scary as a serial killer. And between the gore and the amazing effects that I really, really, really love, and I think it's probably the final movie in the franchise that has this good of effects from what I remember. I could be wrong. I'm getting into the next ones next. We'll talk about it there. But for me, from what I remember all those years ago watching all of these movies, this one for me stood out as the last of the really good practical effects stuff from the franchise. Now, I love it, as I said. I really don't have any complaints. There's not really much to say. There is one part in the movie, and this is more of a writing thing, even though I've already talked about the acting and the characters and how solid everybody was here. I liked everybody in the film and their performances, not so much their characters, but I liked everybody here. I think they're all perfectly cast for what they're doing, especially the monsters, like I said, in a very good Silent Hill performance way. For the writing itself, There is one particular thing that even yesterday, when I watched the Black Phone review from Red Letter Media for the first time, they brought up Scott Derrickson, they brought up this movie, and they showed a clip in their review of probably the weakest part of this entire film. It involves if you're watching it in the context of the movie, it's supposed to be kind of funny and kind of goofy for that reason, with how surreal the rest of the movie is. It involves cowboys that beat up Craig Sheffer. Not as a spoiler. It's about halfway through the movie. And everybody uses that clip when they call Inferno a bad movie. You ever notice that? If you're a fan of Inferno, you ever notice that when you watch reviews? Everybody says it's bad, and they show that clip. And it's bullshit, in my opinion. I think it's really the weakest part of the film. But that's like showing, like, I don't know, that's like showing, when Bane gets hit by Catwoman on the Batmobile bike thing, whatever it's called, the Bat Cycle, I don't know. When he gets hit like that in Dark Knight Rises, and then claiming this is a masterpiece or something. Maybe that was a bad analogy. It probably was. It didn't really serve my purpose. That was probably bad. If I edited things, I would take that out. But anyway, it doesn't matter. My point is, that's not fair. The rest of the movie is really high quality and really solid and really, to me, scary. Depending on what your fears are. My fears are things like mutilation. My fears are things like sin, hell, those kinds of things. This movie meshes all of that better to me than any film previous to it or films after it, even though I haven't seen Judgment yet. I think it just works way better in every way that it possibly could for my personal tastes, and I will stand by the fact that I think it's the best one. The look of the film, the cinematography, the directing, and all that, I think Scott Derrickson, everybody involved with the cinematography crew, they did a killer job. I think everything looks good. To be a low-budget movie in 2000, direct-to-video, it's probably, to me, the best-looking direct-to-video film I've ever seen. I don't really count things like direct-to-streaming like VHS, VHS2, stuff like that, even though they had theatrical releases here and there in a very limited release. But things that are typically put straight to like streaming and stuff, I don't count that the same as direct-to-video, even though the concept is still kind of the same, For me, when it came to like 80s, 90s, 2000s stuff that went straight to DVD or VHS or whatever, to me, this is like the best I've ever seen. It's just my opinion. I love it dearly, as you can tell. The music is kind of weak. They do not use the Hellraiser score. If I remember correctly, I don't think it was used at all. Again, I watched this like last weekend, so it was like Saturday on a 3-day weekend, so I don't remember much because I watched a lot, I reviewed a lot of stuff. I don't remember everything, but I remember the rest of the music I actually really liked, mainly because it took a step away from Hellraiser and that opera sound, because it wouldn't fit here, in my opinion. With the look of the movie, the feel of the movie, the texture and atmosphere of it, it wouldn't fit with this movie. However, it has kind of a noir theme to it, the whole film, with the dirty cop aspect. Some of these movies have this. I think the next film, Hellseeker, is also like that, if I remember correctly. I haven't watched it yet. I'm about to start it when I finish this review, but I remember it having the same thing. It has a noir theme to it, so the music really matches that. It has this kind of a jazziness to it sometimes, and if you don't like that, you're not going to like this. I'll be honest with you. But please, for the love of God, if you've not seen these movies, give Hellraiser Inferno a chance. It is a fantastic movie. I will stand by this film till the day I die. To me, it is the best Hellraiser film up to this point. Again, assuming I haven't seen Judgment and Reboot yet, I'm extremely curious what going through the rest of these films again, like Hellseeker, Deader, Hellworld, the ones I haven't seen in forever. It's been like 9 years, 10 years since I've seen them. Going through those again, I can't wait to see what they're going to be like this time around. But man, this one is so underrated. I cannot believe people don't love it more, and it doesn't get enough praise. I understand it doesn't match the previous films in the franchise, but you can't tell me this isn't wonderful as a standalone movie. You can't tell me if somebody had never seen a Hellraiser film, they knew nothing about it, they came and watched this, you cannot tell me this would not scare the shit out of them. To me, I also happen to have a playlist here on my channel that is the scariest movies I've ever seen reviews. And I'm going to put this in that list. You better believe it. I'm not putting the other ones in there because these other films don't really scare me that much, at least the ones I've been reviewing. This one always has scared me. Since the first time I saw it, and even this time after seeing it 3 or 4 times, it still puts a chill up my spine. I can't resist it. I love it. I love everything about it. And if I had to rate Hellraiser Inferno, my favorite of the Hellraiser films on a 5-star basis, even though the poster's weak, I will tell you, it's a 5 out of 5 stars for me. I love it. I think it's so wonderfully made for the budget that it has. It pulls off so much, and it's so effective. I cannot understand why people hate this movie. Anyway, have you seen Hellraiser Inferno? What do you think about this wonderful hidden gem that people do not appreciate whatsoever in this franchise or this fandom? Not to attack the fans, but please, for the love of God, tell me there are people out there who consider this to be good, because I always see the wish-washiness of people when I talk with them in comments. I saw some people talk about this recently, the horror community. I commented back and forth with them on YouTube. In 1 second of the video, they're talking about how this movie sucks. The next second, they're saying in the comments, like, yeah, it's a great movie as a standalone. Okay, no more to be said. It's a great movie. Stop being wish-washy. Just admit you like it. Or just admit that it's better than what people make it out to be. That's all I want. I just want some peace as a fan of Inferno. Anyway, have you seen Inferno? What did you think about it? I'd love to hear your thoughts and comments down below. I can't wait to see what people trash me over in the comments when they see this review. I'm sorry, I can't help it. It's a great movie and I recommend it highly. One of my favorites of all time, of any franchise, easily. Anyway, thank you for watching, guys. God bless you all. 5 out of 5 stars. I don't regret it at all. I loved it. Yeah, it has some very small flaws that are going to bother some people, but it's unfair how people treat this movie, and I'm not rating it so high because of that. I'm rating it so high because I love it and it scares the crap out of me. Anyway, thank you for watching. God bless you all. Goodbye.